Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me begin by thanking Member States and civil society for their support and engagement with my mandate over the past year. Today, I'm honored to present my report on freedom of expression and elections in the digital age. The report acknowledges the vital role of freedom of expression in ensuring free and fair elections. It notes that rising authoritarian trends, polarized politics in backsliding democracies, social media platforms awash with hate speech and disinformation, and a media sector too weak to debunk the lies have endangered both freedom of expression and the right to vote. The threats must be addressed urgently for the sake of democracy as well as human rights. Let me explain briefly the 4 key concerns in the report. First, authoritarian governments determined to hold on to power and populist politicians eager to win elections at all costs are manipulating information to destroy their political opponents, restrict voter participation, disrupt the electoral process, and delegitimize electoral results. Vilifying minorities and marginalized groups, smearing women politicians, discrediting independent journalists and human rights defenders, targeting electoral officials and observers were worrying trends in many recent elections. Public officials and politicians bear significant responsibility for the degradation of the information environment as they weaponize their own freedom of expression to attack vulnerable groups and to claim that incitement to violence is censorship of lawful speech. Advocacy of hatred to incite violence, increasingly evident on campaign trails and social media platforms, is prohibited under international law, even when it masquerades as political speech. Second, digital technology and social media platforms have taken the threat to a new level, enabling and amplifying disinformation and hate speech as never before. At a time of rising hate and lies and violence, political violence, I'm alarmed to see large social media platforms and search engines backsliding on their commitments to electoral integrity, safety, transparency, and risk management. The largest platforms have radically scaled down staff and resources and rolled back key policies with no apparent human rights due diligence. Although economic considerations and the rise of generative AI played a major part in their decisions, political and ideological considerations have also figured prominently. There is fear of more backsliding by platforms, given the policy position taken by their home country, the current US administration, on freedom of expression. Third, the decline of media freedom is concerning. Journalists covering elections have been violently attacked. Public officials have sought to discredit independent media as liars, traitors, or foreign agents. In some countries, independent media is effectively non-existent because of total state control of the media sector. In some others, the media has been captured by actors aligned with states or other powerful interests. The concentration of media ownership in some countries has led to heavily partisan coverage of elections that undercuts public trust in credible journalism and encourages divisive political debate. As readers and audiences shift to digital platforms, business and financial problems of the media outlets make them more vulnerable to closure or capture, reducing media diversity and pluralism. Fourth, while some states have adopted good electoral information practices based on freedom of expression, some others have disrupted the internet, blocked websites, sponsored disinformation, attacked independent media and fact-checkers, and criminalized legitimate political expression under the guise of fighting disinformation. The report provides extensive recommendations, which I will not repeat here. Let me just highlight 5 points. First, to states, my message is undermining freedom of expression in the name of fighting disinformation is short-sighted and counterproductive. Freedom of expression is vital to healthy democratic discourse. That does not mean that states cannot restrict harmful manipulation of information, but that any such restriction must scrupulously respect the principles of legality, necessity, proportionality, and legitimate objectives set out in international human rights law. Secondly, the backsliding of social media platforms on commitment to human rights and electoral integrity should ring an alarm bell for states and the international community. Smart social regulation is needed, not to control content, but to enforce compliance of companies with their human rights obligations, including due diligence. Thirdly, for companies themselves, they should ensure that their policies and programs are globally consistent, fair, and aligned with their international obligations under the UN guiding principles. Democracy needs a healthy legacy media alongside a trustworthy online environment to ensure a diverse and vibrant electoral information system. The decline of media freedom, independence, diversity, and pluralism should be addressed urgently. And finally, multifaceted, multi-stakeholder strategies grounded in human rights and combining a range of legal and non-legal measures are the most effective way to fight disinformation and other forms of information manipulation. Let me now turn to my report on Zambia, which I carried out, the country visit which I carried out in January 2025. I'm grateful to the government for the invitation and for giving me full access, including at the highest level, and for its constructive engagement on my recommendations. The current government came to power on a platform of change, promising to uphold human rights and carry out legal and institutional changes. Some important steps have been taken. At the national level, the government has introduced some legal reforms. At the international level, it has displayed a concrete willingness to engage with the UN human rights system. As the country moves towards elections, there is need to accelerate the pace of reforms and ensure appropriate safeguards for human rights. In particular, I encourage the government to adopt the Public Gathering Bill, operationalize the Access to Information Act, and clarify the recently adopted Cyber Crimes and Cybersecurity Acts to ensure that the new laws are fully aligned with international standards. I hope the government will continue with the progress of legal and institutional reforms in close consultation with civil society to create a healthy, open environment for information and expression. Now let me turn to the other country visit which I made last year in January to the Philippines. I thank the government for the invitation to me and for facilitating my opportunities to meet with the authorities, civil society, and journalists across the country. I am deeply impressed with the vibrancy and dynamism of civil society and the diverse media landscape of the Philippines. Tolerance, openness, and diversity. However, I'm concerned about the practice of red tagging, which impacts some human rights defenders, social activists, and those critical of the government. Although the government has clarified that it does not condone such a practice, individuals claim that it happens. The Supreme Court decision in May 2024 declared that red tagging is a threat to a person's right to life, liberty, or security. The government should now act on that decision and eliminate the practice totally to turn the page decisively on the past. I'm concerned also by the slow pace of judicial procedures, prolonged pretrial detention, the refusal to grant bail when there is no risk of flight, and the extremely slow disposal of cases makes a travesty of justice, equating the innocent with the guilty. I hope the government will address this problem with urgency. I also found ongoing impunity regarding the killings of journalists, and that must end. While some progress has been made in a few cases, there is great need for bolder efforts to ensure accountability. I hope the government will continue with more significant legal, policy, and institutional changes to demonstrate its commitment to freedom of expression. Thank you.